I loved her for 4 long years, and when she finally got her life back, she handed her heart to someone else. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I chose my own wedding with someone who chose me back, same date, different aisle. And when she heard, she froze, because by then I had already said yes to forever. My name is Alex Carter. For 4 years, I took care of Olivia Brooks after she lost her sight. The very first week she could see again, she accepted a proposal from Ethan Cole, the ex-fiancé who had once crushed her pride until there was nothing left. At first I told myself she must have been confused, that maybe she'd mistaken him for me. Then I overheard a conversation I was never meant to hear, and whatever I had been clinging to snapped. It happened at a rooftop party at the Brooks family hotel. I was headed to the stairwell, tray in hand, doing the job people saw when they looked at me, the aide, the helper, the quiet shadow behind the rich girl. Near the balcony, one of Olivia's friends asked in a low voice, "Liv, did you ever figure out the aide who's been looking after you? That guy, Alex? You know it was him all along, right?" "I know," Olivia said. "Then why?" I couldn't see her face, but her tone was light, almost careless. "You ever hear the saying? The first thing a blind person does when they can see again is throw away the cane." Silence. Music drifted from the speakers, and I gripped the tray hard enough to ache. "He saw me at my worst," Olivia went on. "He knows every weak, ugly part one tried to hide. That kind of person can't be anything but the cane I toss aside. I didn't step in. I didn't defend myself. I set the tray down in a quiet hallway, went back to the guest suite where I slept on a narrow fold-out, wrote a letter of resignation, and walked out of the Brooks mansion before sunrise. I took nothing except a duffel bag, my savings, and 4 years of memories that felt suddenly cheap. Mrs. Brooks, Grace, called me an hour after the housekeeper found my note. "Are you sure you want to resign, Mr. Carter?" Her voice was cool, like she was holding a crystal glass that might crack if warmed by a hand. "I'm sure," I said. Less than 2 weeks earlier, Olivia had still been in bandages, squinting at shadows, holding my arm to find her way. Now I was a loose thread to cut. Grace Brooks didn't argue. She came down to the ground floor office, shut the door, and looked me over the way you look at a sweater you used to love and now can't remember why. I was wearing the same faded jacket I'd had since college. I hadn't slept. My hair needed a cut. Something in her expression shifted, pity or guilt, and she pulled a check from a drawer. "This is $250,000, she said. "A token of our appreciation. Thank you for what you did for my daughter." I knew exactly what it was. Not a thank you. A clean break. Money laid over the last thread so it would cut without fray. I stared at the check. I could have refused, but I didn't. I took it, folded it, and felt the last door in that house swing on silent hinges and shut. I was born in a middle-of-nowhere town in the Midwest, the kind of place where cornfields roll up to the horizon and the wind never stops pressing against the windows. There were more tractors than streetlights. People left their front doors unlocked but their hearts triple-latched. We weren't on most maps. Our school was a squat brick building that lost heat every winter. For high school, the bus to the next county rattled over 18 miles of potholes every morning. In our house, dollars stretched like old rubber bands, thin, tight, ready to snap if you looked too hard. There were 3 kids in my family, and I was the oldest, which meant the hopes and the hard choices hit me first. College wasn't a plan, it was a rumor. Then, in 8th grade, our class joined a pen pal program with a school outside Chicago. It felt like someone cracked a window in a stuffy room. I wrote my first letter with a chewed pencil, 2 pages of questions in smudged handwriting. Do trains really run so fast you can barely see them? Do people there hear sirens every night? Do you have to pay to stand on a tall building and look down at a city that never ends? I didn't expect a reply. People from big places rarely look back at small ones. A month later, a crisp white envelope arrived with my name in neat blue ink. The writing inside was precise, almost formal, but warm in its own way. She answered every question, even the stupid ones, and at the bottom she signed, Olivia. I whispered her name under my breath until it felt like a smooth stone I kept in a pocket. More letters followed. She told me she was 1 year older, loved dogs and piano, and hated the smell of hospitals. She could see the lake from her window. I could see a sea of corn. We kept writing through storms and test weeks and winters that bit to the bone. By the time I finished high school, my family still didn't have a plan for how I'd go further. Then, out of nowhere, my guidance counselor told me someone had offered to sponsor my community college tuition. I cried in the school parking lot, hunched over a steering wheel that barely turned unless you wrestled it. I thought some foundation had found me by accident. 2 years later, when I transferred to a state university, I asked my counselor who had paid. She watched my face like she was checking whether the truth would bruise me and said simply, "Your pen pal, Olivia." The world went very quiet. I had spent all that time imagining the city and the lake and the letters and never once guessed that the person who saved me was a girl 1 state away with tidy handwriting and a soft dislike of hospitals. After graduation, I did what made no sense on paper. I moved to a city near hers. I told myself I was chasing internships, better odds, wider skies. The truth was simpler. I wanted to find her and say thank you with my own mouth, not just my pen. Nothing was as I pictured. Olivia's family wasn't just comfortable. They were old money, the kind of rich that had wings named after them in museums. And she had gone blind. A spill on a marble staircase at a charity gala and a rare complication later, the lights went out. It happened during my junior year of college, right around when her letters stopped. People scattered. At first, her mother came every day, voice clipped, presence clean as a new dollar bill. But love wears thin under strain, and wealth prefers neat solutions. Olivia locked herself in her darkened room and threw whatever she could find. The staff avoided her. Her father lived a town over with a second family. When I finally got myself to the Brooks house, it wasn't to be the grateful ghost from letters past. It was because something in me couldn't stand the idea of her alone in a room she couldn't cross without hitting a wall. I talked my way into a job as a personal aide. At first she hated me. She felt my presence like a lamp she couldn't turn off. She tried to drive me away with small cruelties, the wrong directions, sharp words, a glass of water pushed just past the edge of the table so it would fall when I reached. I kept showing up. I learned the pattern of her furniture, the rhythm of her steps, the hours of her storms. One evening, the sky cracked open. Wind shoved rain against the windows and thunder pounded like someone trying to pry open the world. I was late because a city bus had stalled in floodwater. When I reached the house, the lights were off and the hallway smelled like clean linen and fear. I found Olivia in a closet, knees pulled to her chest, shaking so hard the clothes hangers rattled. Something soft and old in me moved. I sat beside her on the carpet, put an arm around her shoulders, and hummed a tune my grandmother used to sing to my little brother when he woke up scared, something plain and steady and human. Olivia leaned into me like a branch bending toward a river. After that, she didn't push me away. Days turned into seasons. We learned each other by sound and heat and the weight of footsteps in the hallway. I helped her find the kitchen without breaking a glass. I talked to her when nightmares made her call out in the middle of the day. I read novels in the sunroom while she sat in a beam of warm light and traced the raised letters on a learning slate. Slowly, the doctors said there was hope. Slowly, she changed. So did I. Toward the end of the 4th year, on a quiet afternoon laced with dust and sunlight, Olivia asked, "Alex, if I can ever see again, would you marry me?" It landed in my chest like a bell. Her voice had this tiny crack of fear in it, like she was offering me something she was afraid I'd drop. I told her yes so fast it surprised us both. She laughed, bounced up to her feet, and clung to me like she could feel the shape of my face through her hands. I went to sleep that night believing in a future I could almost taste. The week her bandages came off, I overslept on the bus after working a double shift. When I reached the hospital, breathless, I stopped just inside the door. Olivia was standing very straight, hair brushed back, eyes wet. Across from her, Ethan Cole knelt with a small box. His smile was smooth as a salesman's and familiar in a way that punched me. "Thank you for everything these past 4 years," Olivia told him. "I never forgot." She put out her hand. He slid a ring onto her finger. Behind me, someone cleared their throat. Grace was there, watching my face with a look that said she knew exactly where this knife would cut. "Alex," she said, and motioned me into the hall. "You understand that you and Olivia come from different worlds. If not for the accident, you two would never have crossed paths." I opened my mouth to argue and shut it. She was right. If not for the accident, the Brooks name would have stayed inside magazine covers, not spilled into my weekday routines. "I'm not cruel," Grace continued. "If Olivia realizes before the wedding that you're the one she loves, I won't stop her. But if she doesn't, then let it be. In our world, she needs someone who matches her. Someone who can hold the weight with her." Back in the room, Olivia was still glowing. She looked at me like I was a coat rack. "Could you get me some water?" she asked, and then to Ethan, with a smile that used to be mine. "I'm starving. Maybe an apple?" "Hey," Ethan said, eyes sliding to me. "Have the help peel it. And tell him to wear gloves. I don't put anything in my fiancé's mouth that's touched bare hands." I peeled the apple in strips that stayed together, because that's how Olivia liked it when she couldn't see. She didn't look at me. When I held it out, she wrinkled her nose. "Too thick." I peeled another. "Too thin." Another. The peel broke. When there were no apples left, she laughed lightly and said she wasn't hungry. I stared at the small white seeds scattered across a plate, swallowed something bitter, and put my face back in its polite shape. The engagement party arrived on a Thursday, because the Brooks family liked to start their weekends early, and that night on the rooftop I heard Olivia call me a Cain. I went home, packed, and left at dawn. I told the house manager I was going back home. There wasn't much to return to. My mother had died 2 winters earlier. My father had sold the farm and moved into a studio above a bait shop. The place I wanted didn't exist anymore, if it ever had. At the train station, I picked a westbound bus because all the seats were facing that way. Maybe I just needed to watch the country change. The bus left the city like it was slipping out of a suit. I rode until the land grew into hills and fir trees and the air tasted like rain and cedar. I got off in a coastal town where the gulls complained all day and the water was the only clock you needed. I found a room above a bakery and slept for 12 hours. Healing isn't fast, even when you're trying. The harder I tried to forget, the more my mind found the shape of her name at odd moments. I took long walks by the harbor at night. One night, leaning on the rail and watching the black water move, I felt a sudden hard yank on the back of my jacket. I stumbled and landed hard on the deck, palms stinging. "Don't do it!" a voice shouted. I spun around. A woman stood there, breathing fast like she'd run. She had short brown hair that didn't care what wind did to it, and eyes the color of a bottle held up to the sun, green with bits of gold. "Are you okay?" she asked. Sorry. I thought you were going to jump." "I wasn't," I said, and tried to smile. "I was just thinking." She flushed and laughed at herself, this embarrassed, musical sound. "I am so sorry. That was, wow. I'm Nora. Alex." We stood in the wind, 2 strangers trying to calibrate the distance between concern and intrusion, and something inside me eased. We swapped numbers, not because either of us meant anything huge by it, but because she wanted to be sure I had someone to text if the water ever looked kinder than the street. I stayed. I got work unloading crates in the morning and helping an old florist in the afternoon. The flower shop's owner, Ms. Jensen, had arthritic hands and a stubborn streak. When she decided to retire, she offered to sell me the place for a price that made me suspect she was lying about market value. I bought it and painted the door a cheerful blue. I called it Harbor Petals, because every name I brainstormed after that sounded fake. Nora stopped by often. She was in her final year at the small college up the hill, studying marine biology and making coffee so strong it could lift a car. She helped on weekends, claiming it was for field research on terrestrial blooms, which is not a thing but sounded less like. I want to be near you. We didn't rush. We talked about silly things. She liked old movies and good bread. I liked dogs and the way towns sounded at dawn. Sometimes she reached for my hand and sometimes I pulled back without knowing why. Grief has long fingers. She didn't push. She just kept showing up with clean laughter and practical kindness, and the shop filled with color, and the days started to fit me. One afternoon in late spring, the shop phone rang while I was sorting invoices. Harbor Petals, I said, a pencil tucked behind my ear. Silence. Hello? Do you want to place an order? A breath soft, like the phone had a tide of its own. Alex? Her voice hit me like a cold wave over the head. Olivia. It had been the better part of a year, with the coastal seasons turning from the wet chill of winter to the bright promise of late spring. I looked at the door because I needed to look at something. Ms. Brooks, I said. What can I do for you? Did you really quit? She asked. My mother said you went back home to get married. That's right, I said. The lie tasted less like a lie than it had the first time. Maybe because home can be wherever you decide to set down a box and a hope. I went to your town, she whispered. You weren't there. There was a time when the idea of her going anywhere for me would have lit me up from the inside. I stood with the phone warm against my ear and felt a kind of quiet instead. If there's nothing else, Ms. Brooks, I said, I need to get back to work. I'm getting married next Friday, she blurted. You'll come to the wedding, won't you? For a second, every nerve in me wanted to go. To stand at the back and watch her put a ring on a finger and know I had survived it. I can't, I said. Why not? Because I'm getting married too. I hung up before the echo of my own words could catch me. Afterward I stood at the counter and breathed like a person who had been underwater a long time. The shop bell chimed. Nora walked in with a bag of pastries and her hair jammed into a baseball cap. She didn't bring roses, she loathed clichés, but she did bring tulips, which she insisted were superior because they keep growing after you cut them, like small stubborn miracles. I watched her mess with the vase and felt something in me step forward to meet her. Nora, I said. Let's try this for real. Her smile started slow and then hid her whole face. Okay, she said, like she had been holding her breath for weeks and finally exhaled. The next days felt like a string of bright flags across the street. We closed the shop one afternoon and drove up the coast to a boardwalk park with rusty rides and a Ferris wheel that had learned patience. Nora made me go on the bumper cars twice and the carousel once. For science. We were sticky with salt air and powdered sugar, and for the first time in a long time, happiness felt like a thing that wanted me back. I sat on a bench and watched her jog to a stand to get ice cream. A shadow fell over me and I looked up, expecting to see Nora teasing me with a spoon. Instead, Olivia stood there. She looked thinner. Her hair was tied back like she had done it in a hurry. Her eyes found mine and lit with a flash of something like relief. I stood. Olivia. She took a step as if to hug me, then stopped when I didn't move to meet her. Surprise flickered across her face like a power outage. She wasn't used to me saying no with my body. Please don't go, she said, as Nora walked back toward us with 2 cones and that bright skip in her step. Olivia's voice dropped. I know I was wrong. I thought I had to choose the life that made sense on paper. But I never loved him. I never wanted him. It was always you. Can we go back? I had imagined this scene 100 times. In most versions, I forgave her instantly and we kissed under fireworks. In some, I delivered a perfect speech and walked away with my head high while she cried. In reality, I felt an emptiness so clean it almost sparkled. Not cruel. Just done. You were right, I said quietly. We are from different worlds. I used to think love was a bridge long enough to cross any distance. Maybe it is. But it shouldn't be a bridge I walk alone. Her mouth trembled. She reached out, then dropped her hand. Nora came close, glanced between us, and didn't ask questions. She slid her fingers through mine, and the world decided which side of the line I stood on. I pulled the folded check from my wallet, the one Grace Brooks had given me the morning I left. I pressed it into Olivia's hands. I took care of you because I wanted to, I said. Because you mattered to me. This was never my money. Keep it. Or burn it. I don't care. I'm done keeping any piece of this that doesn't belong to me. We walked away. I didn't look back. There is a kind of dignity only your own feet can give you. That night, I told Nora everything, the letters, the accident, the storm, the rooftop, the apple peels, the phone call, the bench. I expected anger. She wrapped her arms around me and said nothing for a long time. Then she tipped her face up and blinked fast. You're crying? I said, startled. No, she whispered, her voice thick. I'm heartbroken for you. For everything you went through and how you still learned to be so kind. No one had ever said they were heartbroken for me. Not like that. Something tight in my chest loosened until it hurt. I laughed once softly, because the other option was to cry and I was tired of tears. Later, we lay in the dark, and Nora's heartbeat under my ear steadied me the way humming had steadied Olivia years ago. Life is strange with its circles. Alex? Nora whispered into the dark. Today, when you called me babe, did you mean it or were you just trying to make a point? I meant it. She was quiet for a long breath, then another. Okay, she said. Then I need to ask you a thing I promised myself I'd wait to ask. I propped up on an elbow. Ask. I love you. I've loved you since you fell on that pier and tried to act like it didn't hurt. Her laugh was a shaky little thing. Will you marry me? I had ready a dozen jokes. None of them fit. Yes, I said. The word felt like dropping a heavy pack at the end of a long road. We didn't plan a grand affair. We booked a small hall above the library because it smelled like paper and time. We set the date for a Friday, because we were both working Saturdays and didn't want to bother with rescheduling. The morning of the wedding, I woke at 7, the light in our small apartment as soft as fresh bread. My phone buzzed while I was trying to learn how to fold a pocket square. It was a number I knew but hadn't saved. Alex, a man said as soon as I answered. It's Marcus. We've met. I'm one of Ethan's friends. Look, she's not good. She's been falling apart. Can you come? I stared at the mirror, the tie slightly crooked, the face older than I remembered. I didn't say yes or no. Marcus rushed on, a pressure behind his words. Back in college, after a fight with her mother, they cut her off. She still sent money for your tuition. She took on 3 side gigs. She sold a Steinway, man. She always cared about you. The Steinway line was designed to break me. Maybe it would have, once. I thought of Olivia as a girl with ink on her fingers, writing patience into my life. I thought of her as a woman in a closet shaking in a storm. I thought of her on a rooftop calling me a Cain. If she loved me, I said, she should have said my name when it counted. People change, Marcus pleaded. They do, I said. So did I. Across the room, Nora stood in the doorway in a simple dress the color of cloud edges. She didn't ask who was on the phone. She smiled like the answer didn't matter as long as I was here to give it. I told Marcus the only honest thing left. You should find a therapist for her, I said. I'm not what she needs. I blocked the number. We walked to the library together, fingers threaded like we had practiced this our whole lives. On the steps, Nora squeezed my hand once and whispered, Ready? Yeah, I said and meant it. We said our vows while the afternoon light turned the room gold. Friends clapped. Miss Jensen cried into a tissue and told everyone the peonies were her idea. I danced with Nora to a song we picked because it sounded like a sunny kitchen. When the cake was gone and the lights low and the last guest waved from the door, we stood there in the quiet and listened to our two hearts make one simple sound. On the morning of our first anniversary, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of gulls complaining that humans hoard bread. Nora had put a single sunflower in a glass on the table, lopsided and perfect. There was no grand speech, no cinematic swell of violins. Just her bare feet on our kitchen tile, and my hand reaching for hers without thinking. I loved Olivia Brooks for 4 years. She came into my life like a storm, loud and messy, and left me with a lesson written on a florist's receipt: when someone calls you their cane, don't argue. Just learn to walk without them. Nora arrived like harbor water at dawn, steady, patient, making room for a boat that needed rest. I used to believe love was what you said in the middle of a storm. Now I know it's what you build on all the quiet days after. The world is big. Somewhere, someone is watching the same sky and hoping to be chosen. Be that for each other. And most of all, be that for yourself. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, please consider liking and subscribing. Your support means the world. Share your thoughts in the comments below.